So I'll respell that again. Hard K A Q A W A K A N MITUK. Kakawakan mitok. Kakawakan mitok. So if you want to write that down in your phonetical way we were learning last week. Okay, Laura, can you put up the other map that we have? Okay, this is the map that I want to talk about tonight. And the from last week's creation story, which is on the right, the writing that's on the right corner there, is what this map is referring to. And our whole Ktunaxa territory was broken up into what I call districts. And all these districts were named after animals. And we have Ktunaxa. Can you put a pointer on that, Mara, with your, it's the top one, Ktunaxa, which is bald eagle. Yeah, that territory up in that top area. And then below that, we have Gyawat Amakis, which is the fool hen, which I live on Gyawat Amakis, and the boundary between Bald Eagle's land and Gyawat is the Columbia River that goes from Canal Flat and on up through Golden. So Gyawat is on the east side, and Bald Eagle is on the west side of it, going up towards Golden and higher than that. And then to the west of the Bald Eagle land, we have Mitskakas Amakis, or Chickadee's land. So all those three areas are on the top part. And then we go down to Cooking Amakis, or Raven's land, which is the Sparwood Ferny area. And the Crow's Nest Pass area, the I believe that's why they call it Crow's Nest, but they had, rather than calling it Raven's land, they call it Crow's Nest, the Crow's Nest area. So I always say they picked the wrong bird. It's supposed to be a raven and not crow. And then so down below that, just above what's now the international border between Canada and the US, we have Ktunaxa, which is woodtick's land. So that goes all the way down to the end of down to Yakawatsamki, where his head is, where Nasmukchin's head is. Remember, Nasmukchin was the big giant. So Chamna Amak is, and then to the west of that is Skinkuts Amak is, or the coyotes' land. And then coming back up a little bit into the West Kootenays area, we have Achpo Amakis, or Wolverine's land. So I haven't done a lot of research into the history or why these districts were put in place, but in my thinking of looking at the map and that when the tribe, when the different bands were doing different activities and they had their responsibilities for the year, they would communicate that, let's say, if I was going up to towards the Revelstoke area, around the Big Bend area, I would let other people know that myself and my group are going into Mitskaka's land. And then we would have uh, Tunawakan Mituk, which means where the river comes out into the valley. You know, we would say we will be staying, camping at Tunawakan Mituk, and then we'll be going up further north and doing whatever we have to do. Then another group will be saying that, oh, okay, we are, let's say the Tobacco Plains group could be going over to the prairies to get buffalo. So they would say, we are going to go over into the big flat area to get buffalo. And we will be camped over in Cookin Amakis in Ravens Land. And then there was, that would give the basic location or area. And then from that, they would name a place within that area that was a well-known camping area. So these were fairly useful districts to create a, I would say, a very organized system of people not running into each other, going into the same area for harvesting or doing stuff like that. And then they would have a couple of meeting places. White Swan Lake was one of the major meeting places where in the winter they would all gather, or just before winter they would gather and they would trade um, for, let's say, my group went up north to get huckleberries and some other root that's in that area. Then we would take enough to go back to meet with everybody and do some trading. The people that went for buffalo would come back with the dried meat, and they would trade so that everybody had a share in the food resources in the area.
Hey, Alfred, quick question for you.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of participants wonder if it's possible to email them out the maps from the presentation. I could turn them into a PDF if that's helpful, and or I don't know what if that's something we can do.
I think the mayor was going to be doing it after the session.
Great.
Yeah. So when you do get the maps, you will see the different areas, and also the other point I wanted to bring out was that we have got seven different communities. I always say Ktunaxa communities within our area. We have the Shuswap Reserve, which was a branch of the Ktunaxa Reserve. The Ktunaxa community is between Windermere and Fairmont Hot Springs. And the Shuswap, when the reserves were formed, there was a lot of intermarriage between the Kinbasket group and our Ktunaxa people. So we've had brothers. One brother would stay, take a place up in Ktunaxa, and the other brother went over into the Shuswap Reserve and took up property there. And one example of that is Dave and Louis Capello, which are fairly close relatives of mine through my father's side. So Dave Capello stayed in Ktunaxa, while Louis Capello moved over to the Shuswap Reserve. So those two in the north, and then we have Akam or St. Mary's out of Cranbrook. Then further south, we have on the map, we have Akin Ktunaxa, which really means the prairie that goes around the corner, the long prairie that goes around the corner. And that community has decided that they will be using the Yakit Aknokset, or the Tobacco Plains, for their name. And then further down, we have around the Flathead Lake, we have the Elmo band of Ktunaxa. Another word for the group down there is Ksanka, Ksanka, but we all speak the same language, or very close to the same language. And then when you come back up, we have a small group in Bonner's Ferry. There's a Ktunaxa community there in Bonner's Ferry. The Bonner's Ferry, when I was a young 12-year-old or so, the Bonner's Ferry group was not being recognized by the American government. And so they were in very dire straits. They weren't getting any funding. They weren't being recognized as a group, as an indigenous group from that area. So what they did, the leader was a lady. She just got organized, and she was not being heard. So she declared war against the US government. And that is, there is um, a film on that called The Forgotten War. And that is about that, that case where the small group of Kootenai Indians down there fought against, declared war on the United States. And it was, from what I understand, was very, very tense during that time. But if you're interested in that little bit of history, it's called the Forgotten War, I believe it's called. So I've got a copy of it here somewhere. And the lady that started or pushed for that activity, that activist, just passed away not too long ago. Like some of our people near, I know one lady that was part of that movement. She was from Elmo, and when that happened, um, she went up to Bonners and helped them there. So further up the river, as you go down the river, you end up back into Canada at our other community called Yakanooki, where the rock cliff is, and that's in Creston. And those people there were what we call our lakes people, or water people. The Kootenai River, like I said last week, the Kootenai River, according to us in our area here, and Kishkanook and the Shuswap Reserve, we called, the old people called the Kootenai River Wo'o Aksmaknik Akanmitok, the water people's river. So that one went down from Canal Flats, would float all the way down, and then came back up into and went right by Creston, and then that group was our fisher people, our fishermen. Uh, you'll see that they were called the Lower Kootenai, and they had a different way of living. They were more water people. They relied on the fish. So then we would have trading with them with stuff like that. And within our whole territory, we have got trails that go across. For example, here where I'm at by Fairmont, we have a trail that goes above my place heading east, and we come out at the Elkford area and that to go out into the prairies. That was one of the trails. There's another trail that went from the almost, I think, the Canada-US border heading east onto the prairies that our lower vans used within that area. There was one other van that Keenik, which were living around the Livy, Montana, but their area got flooded out when they built the dam, so the Livy Dam. So that is our different communities. And yeah, the Monastery Kankame, which means the island people. Now, I'm not too sure. My uncle was married down there. He married into that band, and I remember going down there as a young person when I was probably about 5 or 6. But I don't know too much about that area, why it was called an island. There must have been an island there at one point in time, and they may have changed it with and made it and filled in the channel or something to make it a little bit different. But that is what I have for here. We have a name for Calgary. Translated, it means elbow. Ktunaxa, Ktunaxa, and we have a name for Lethbridge, Aquum, which means stomach. And then we also have a name for Kootenai Plains, which is up north by Rocky Mountain House. Ktunaxa. And interesting story about Kootenai Plains area is my grandmother, who was born here. On my sister and my cousins talk about, she would always be sitting in the house in her later years, and she'd be pointing across the valley, and she'd tell them, "I was born up on a mountain over there," and she'd point over there, and I'm not too sure which mountain it was, nor did my cousins or sister really pay attention to an old lady who they thought was crazy. so, so we don't know which mountain that was. But she talks about in a newspaper clipping that I found, she talks about her dad, whose name was Matthias. And in our language, we his name was Matthias. She says that Matthias walked over towards that area to Kootenai Plains area. She remembers 3 times in her lifetime. And so that was quite interesting. And so it would have been nice to be able to hear the stories like that of why would he walk all that way from here, which is a long ways. And for what purpose, was he going over there for? So then we have a lot of, I would say, gaps within our history of the Ktunaxa. I'm always learning stuff or trying to learn stuff, and which goes back to the language, because sometimes we have some recordings, and if I can listen to recordings, I can make out of some of what is being said. And that was the only way that we were able to get some of the stories handed down. Now, was there any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Alfred, yeah, I'm looking at the map, and a lot of the places where you've introduced those land areas, and they're either the land of the raven or the eagle, and then there's by Columbia Lake a bird, and I don't know, I think what you what I learned last week was that the Columbia Lake, what it means is where the two lakes come together. But that bird, what does that represent? I wonder.
The word, you have to expand. That word is just representing it. It's plotted there. Doesn't mean that it lives there, but that area where it is and north of it is called the Fool Hens district. Yeah, and one of the
Okay.
stories that
Thank you.
I was going up here. I had a trail crew, and we were going up just above the house here, but way back in the mountains. And I had my cousin. He was way older than I was. I had him helping with cutting trail. He must have been in his 60s. So in my books, if you really want to know how I am, if you can walk and walk fairly good, I can take you up in those mountains, and I expect you to to be able to do that. But we were going up, we were about 15, 20 minutes from the top of a mountain, and we were on this old, what I call the old Indian Trail, one of our old trails that we um, used to use years ago. And we're hiking up there, and he stops and he says, I never ever thought I would ever be back up here again. And so I looked at him and I said, what do you mean? Then he told me a story of when he was about 11 years old, his dad took him up there. His name was Mose Michelle. Took him up there, and they had a couple of horses. So his dad told him, they seen some goats up there. So his dad told him, you stay here, I'll take the horses over the top. I want you to shoot a goat. But he couldn't shoot a goat. I don't know why he couldn't shoot a goat. So his dad came back over on the other side, from the other side up. He tied the horses up and he shot a goat. And for me, in my mind, I never ever thought that he would have been up there. But he recognized that area from an 11-year-old to he was in his 60s when he was up there. So that's what I mean. Age doesn't matter to me. If you're capable of hiking around, you're gonna they're gonna go wherever I go. So and yeah, so that was the story. And he was one that told me about that was the first time I heard about the Fool Hens land. He called it, yeah, this is what a muck is. And I thought it was just that little drainage. But later I found it was the whole district. So are there any other questions?
I presume at some point we'll be getting to the Ktunaxa names for those animals as well. Is that, do you think?
I believe so. I believe Mara, do you have all of them or down in the
And the birds that we don't have names for, we can definitely add.
okay. Yeah, you're a little teeny, so but yeah, we will be sure to keep on reminding people. So if you want to check once you get the map, check to see where you're located at and try and see if what animal district you're in or what bird district you're in would be a good exercise for you to do during the week here. And then that goes into learning the word for the district. So there's always ways of giving homework to people. So is there any questions from last week, the ones that were present, about the names that I had given you for your towns? Okay, can anybody tell me what English word you would use to get close to the sound of the Ktunaxa Q?
The goose.
I gave you two words. One was what?
Gull, right? Yeah.
Yeah, gull.
I just had the
Seagull
seagulls.
and okay, seagull, and the other one was gullible. Gullible. So the reason why I'm going to keep reminding you guys that, because the more you say it, the more you're going to feel that where that comes from, where that sound comes from, because some of our Ktunaxa sounds are from way back there and way to bottom. So we've got, that's the easy one. That's the Q. The hard Q comes from the same area, but it's a little bit different. And what about the K, the hard K? What was the English word for that similar?
Is that G?
Anybody?
G?
No, K, the K. Remember the hard K, some of the words, like this, the word for firewood starts with a hard K. Ka. So what was the English word that I said was fairly close to that K? It was kill. Kill. Okay. And then the cent sign, what do we call a cent sign, or the Ktunaxa C, was sounded like what?
Like cha.
Yeah, ch. So those are three, like children. So those would be three words that you have to keep in the back of your mind when you're doing the once you get started with the language, to remember that. I always like to be leading ahead with a little bit of stuff, so that when we start into the language, that you guys will have a bit of a head start. So, and once you get these maps, there'll be the two maps. One is the the district maps, that's with the animals. And the other one is just the name, some of the name places. That we have. And one of my sort of big complaints about, because I'm always up in the mountains, or used to be up in the mountains a lot. I've always been one trying to get those trails mapped, mapped out. Because everywhere I go, I find a little piece of a trail, what I call our old Indian trails that are traveling trails. And they are usually not close to any roads. And it's quite a interesting, and most of the trails are never on the north facing slopes of the mountain valleys or the mountains. They're always on the south facing slope. Reason for that would be north facing slopes are really thickly thick with brush, while the south facing slopes are a little bit more open. And our groups very seldom traveled on the bottom, on the valley bottoms, like we do now. They traveled up higher into about the top third of any of the mountains that they went across, because that was the place where the animals traveled, and there was very little bit of timber or things falling in the way of being blocking those trails. So those are some of the things that I found over the years in my travels up in the mountains. And a lot of times I can go up, and if I'm just hiking up when I used to hike up in the mountains, I go straight up from, let's say one point to the bottom. I go straight up the mountain and get to different trails going across and have a look at them. If I knew which one was an animal trail, I usually didn't follow it, but I'd continue on up and I'd find some what I call hunting trails, or some our old traveling trails. So I had two categories of trails. And so I've been wanting all our trails to be mapped out, in which I haven't had any success yet in getting that done. But usually if I'm very persistent, and I usually don't shut up until I get my way. So, okay, is there any questions about the different districts?
Hi, Alfred. I have a question. Looking at the district
Yep.
map, I noticed that the words for Lower Kootenay, Yakanuki, and Canal Flats are really similar. And I wonder if you could say those two words so I can try to hear the difference, and if you have any thoughts on why those two names seem so similar.
They are similar. They are the same word.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
They're spelled
Yeah,
slightly
so
differently
that-
on the map.
They are both the same words where the rock is standing, is what it translates to.
Mm-hmm.
So where the rock is standing is the rock bluff that is just above Canal Flats on the east side. And that is where, in the legend, that is where Nasmukchen would have swiped that mountain and knocked that piece off. Now, I haven't gone down to Preston Yakanoki to find out their story about, why that's called Yakanoki.
Right.
But you'll
Thanks.
find that, yeah, you'll find that a lot of our names, like in describe a natural thing, like where the water comes out of a lake, that is Ktunaxa. So we have Ktunaxa at which is our name for Athelmere, BC, here on the way to Invermere. When you go down the bottom of the hill, that's called Ktunaxa. And also there is on the Flathead Lake at I can't remember the name of the town. Is it Folsom? Yeah, Folsom. That's called Ktunaxa too. So where the river come or forms coming out of the lake. So there'll be a lot of different places with the same name sometimes. And a lot of the names are either Nasmukchin, the big giant, gave them the name because that was his job. He had to go around and name places. Like we have got here in our community here, we have a place called Kananok, which means where the baby's crawling out, as Nasmukchin was going through here. And we have quite a few place names in this area. As he was going through, he was naming all these places for the people to remember. And so some of the names, even the elders back in the late 60s, mid 60s, they didn't know what the names meant, but they knew of the name and the place where it was, but they didn't know what it meant because it got lost over the generations. So there was Nasmukchin name places, there was places where things happened within our creation story. Like I said last week, the story about Yawukikam, who is one of our legendary characters. There's also the creation story, which I read. And then there's also places where some kind of where something happened, something of importance happened, or a place where they did things, like in White Swan Lake, where they played hockey, or like something similar to hockey. And we have one place up between White Swan and I'm thinking Premier Lake, somewhere there's a lake, I believe, there that where in my interpretation of the place, where there was a beheading. So and that goes, I believe, back to a legend. Like I don't know a lot of legends. Well, I believe it goes back to a legend there was a fight between a Yakanoki chief and an Akishkanok chief, and where the Akishkanok chief had killed the son of the Yakanoki chief. And that's all I know. That's one of the things that I try not to do is get too involved in trying to learn all the legends, because I think my job, the more important job, is to get the language going. So my versions of these legends are very, very Reader's Digest versions. Usually about 3 or 4 sentences, and that's it. Well, there was, I know there is a lot more different places other than what's on these maps, where the, let's say the generation, my parents' generation, where they went camping or hunting or, you know, like stuff like that. And which we never learned because we were away like 10 months of the year. And then the two months we were at home, we were just sort of running, enjoying our freedom. So we had no, you know, we weren't staying in the house and we just were out doing our thing. So any other questions?
I had a question going back to the different sounds, and I was just think of the bard L. Is that the THL sound?
Yeah.
And is it
Yeah,
made
THL.
by?
That sound is made by pressing your tip of your tongue to the base of your lower teeth and top of the gum and just blowing out. Yeah,
Okay.
very similar to that.
Thank you.
And the other one, while we're at that, the other one that is very difficult is okay, you know, when you are eating popcorn and you end up with a howl in the back of your throat, like just at the top of your throat. So when you try and clear that, what are you doing? You make like, right? So that sound is similar. Well, it's basically the sound of our X. Like XAXA is the word for crow. It's a Ktunaxa word for crow. And that word is ha ha, ha ha. And you get that sound by, I learn all these things because I try and make it fun for everybody. And the Sparwood teachers were the first ones that ever got that exercise to do. Because it's really hard to teach these sounds unless I look back and say, okay, what are the closest things that happen that we can get the sound in? And I thought, okay, if you get a little popcorn hollow cover stuck in the back of your throat and you got to clear it and you just sort of, you know, go, and that's how our X sound is. So
It's also like a Dutch G, right? Yeah.
I don't know. The Welsh, I was told the Welsh language was fairly, well, not fairly close. We had some similar sounds. And as growing up as a young teenager, I was looking for everything I could find that was written about the Kootenai Indians. And in one of the writings that I found that the author was saying that the Kootenays were the lost Welsh people. So then, you know, and I sort of wondered about that. And I had to happen to get a Welsh fellow here visiting one time, and so I talked to him about his language, and there's only a couple of sounds that were similar. So we definitely aren't the lost Welsh people. So what did you say about sound? A Dutch G?
Yeah, I can speak to that because my name is Sanne and my last name is Van der Ros, very Dutch. I grew up there. And so in my language, you have a hard like that if you're north of the rivers, and the rivers cut the country in half, and south of the rivers it's a soft like. So if you're north of the rivers, it sounds like the Ktunaxa X, like that.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's a very common sound in the Netherlands in Dutch, in my language. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, it took me a hard time to try and figure out how to teach that X sound, because it was, like, I'm not a linguist and I don't like to use linguist terminology, because I want to learn or be able to teach people to learn the language as comfortable as possible and yet make the proper sounds. One of the other things that I always say is, in our language, in the Ktunaxa language, like from the exercise we went through last week, our T's, T were very similar to the D sound. And then we also have a hard T, which is a T with apostrophe on top of it. And that is different than like for TUHU Vardell, Tohos, TUHU Vardell. That is a fish. I think it's a char. Tohos. So we have the D sounding, but it's not quite a D. It's between a D and a T. So I always tell people, especially English speaking people, it is not Tohos. It is not Tohos. So I am very, I'm gonna call it strict with that, because of the fact that if you say Tohos, you're anglicizing that. I tell that to our members when they say akam. Akam is the proper way of saying it. And if I hear them saying akam with the small seagull sound, right? Akam instead of akam, which is back in the throat, I will tell them, I say, there is no English word for akam. So quit saying akam. So then, yeah, we've got all those different things that you can practice, or different sounds. The THL or the Vardell, the what would be a good word for that? Sa so Vardell A, Vardell U, sa so, and then NI me, sa so ne. Sa so ne means there's none left. There's no more. Sa so ne. And I believe those are the harder sounds, except for the harder K's in that, but we'll get into that. We have an exercise that we go through to I'm going to call it solidify, getting those sounds as close to perfect as possible. I know sometimes the X sound, like the sound, because I didn't know how to get that taught, how to get people to, acquire that sound. I would tell English speakers, we will allow you to put an H in there instead of the X sound. But this group, we're not going to do that because I figured out how to get you guys to say that sound. So so when we say the word Ktunaxa, we used to allow people to say Ktunaxa. But like now you guys are past that. That's not going to be an okay thing to do. So we have to decide on how are we going to reprimand people when they don't get the proper sound. How can I hit you guys in the head?
I have all their payment information. I could just ding them with $5 every time if you want.
So any other questions or? Well, I haven't been looking in the chat. Is there anything in the chat?
I just sent to Mara. I'd found a Ktunaxa kind of guide, of a quick guide for the symbols and characters, and some of they don't have the descriptions, the good descriptions you've got of the husk or the corn at the back of your mouth.
Yeah.
But,
The popcorn.
yeah, but it seemed pretty like a good summary that I could hang on my wall and like start to remember. But maybe I could share that with you and you could have a look, or Mara could forward it on and you could have a look at it and see.
Yeah, I think before next week we are planning on having everybody have the start of have the lesson plan, so they have it in front of them. These two sessions were just for an introduction and about the land formations, and we probably will be getting into more later on too if people have questions. Like it is a basically an open style of language lessons. It's not going to be that difficult. I'm just saying what I'm saying to scare you guys so you guys stay in line. But one of the things, like I see there was a question about what is a pool hand, or a pool hand. The story that I heard is the pool hand is called that because it was a survival food when the people would go up in the mountains, they would get some horse tail, and I'm assuming they braided up. They braided a little bit of horse tail, made a noose out of it. And they would have a stick, have it hang off a stick, and they see these grouse up in the mountains, and they can lasso them and you get them for food. So that's why they were called the fool hen. And a lot of them are, that would be the ones that are high up in the mountains. So
Because we're in the region of the fool hen, the spruce groats, I'm gonna want to teach that to my kids tonight. Is that Cowats?
yeah, what?
Cow-
Yeah, what? Yeah, with an A. So you're in Windermere or Invermere?
Well, in Vermeer, so I know that's
Yeah,
Ktunaxa.
You're not in you're in Ktunaxa. You're
Okay,
in the Eagle's land.
but
Yeah, the
Windermere
river is
is
the
in,
boundary.
okay. Good
Yeah.
to know.
So you can erase Gilwatts out of your mind.
I'll tell that to my wife who teaches in Windermere. She can learn that.
Yeah, that's right. Mhm.
Alfred, I'm wondering if I could ask you a question about seasons and the months. We might be covering that later, but I'm working with the kids on November. I know Supka is in that name, the rutting deer. I'm just wondering how you pronounce that, because I've been really trying to work on that one. It's a long name, so could you help me with that?
That one has got a hard key. So it would be like very similar to the T in tinker. Tinker, tasok, jupka, jupka. That means, yeah, the deer making sound. Yeah, the deer making sound. And you'll notice, because it is a month, a word for a month, and it is a thing, the people added a K to that, but they add the K sound to that. Ktasok, same as Kto, K2U, Ktunaxa, Ktunaxa. But a lot of times, even some of our beginner speakers, we won't make them make that KT combination sound because it's a fairly difficult. So it's a very quick, but when you're learning, you tend to hang on trying to say the kto, and it's really kto. Yeah, asok, chupka.
So can
Yeah, so there's going to be some things that we will allow to just slip by because of the difficulty of the some of the what I call the combinations of sounds. But the most of them, like the most important thing is that the English T, the English K, you have to not think of it. Let's say if you saw K-I-L-U, the word K-I-L-U, it would be queso. Queso. It is not queso. So that's one of the things I'm going to be fairly strict with on that, because once you allow, in my books and in my rules, in my world, once you allow that little bit of slip in saying queso, it really changes the word. Our elders that speak the language, the few we have left, if you told them that, they sort of look at you and think, okay, what are you trying to say? You know, instead of queso, if you said, is there any, like queso is a question, you know, is there any? And you would, and if you said queso, and they look at you and sort of wonder, what is he trying to say, or what is that person trying to say? And then it's a guessing game. And what a lot of our members get to be too scared to, you know, try and make a mistake, and then they get corrected and they get offended. And in my world, if, you know, the only time you should get offended is if I slap you in the side of the head. But they, you know, that's one of the things, that's one of our things we have to, as a teacher, have to battle that fear of learning the language. So I try and make everything nice and fun at times. So any other questions?
So in J sequitnum, would it be, I often say key sequitnum. Is it K sequitnum then? Would that be more, rather than the key sequitnum?
Depends on, so there's a couple of glottals in there. Get so which noun? Which noun is
K
the way to
sequitnum.
say it. Yeah. It means good morning. Kesok or Kesok Kyokiet, good day. Kesok Kwaskwayet is good evening. Kesok Tismeyet, good night. But I think we've got all that in our language, I believe later on, but I'm not too sure. Do we have that in our? I don't think we do.
Yep. He.
Okay. And one of the things which Meredith reminded me of is 2 words you can learn. Waha is no, and he is yes. And probably the third one to learn for kids, ma, M-A glottal cent sign, which means don't or quit it. Much.
What is, sorry, what's the word for yes again, Alfred? I missed that. Sorry.
He, H-I-Y. Either he or I used to hear he, H-I, he. And in
Thank you.
the other rule that I usually have is because as English speakers, we've learned when you're in English that when you're talking, you are supposed to have a very fluid speech. In Ktunaxa, it doesn't matter. You create your own rhythm. I don't know if I told you that last week or not. You end up creating your own rhythm. And if you happen to, and a lot of times we have an expression, we in Canada or in my group here in and in Ktunaxa, we have a word that is chinna, which means gee whiz, or it's an expression of either disgust or surprise, depends on how you use it. So if somebody told me a story about someone being really stupid and they did some stupid thing, I'd say chinna. And then if I was mad at someone and they weren't listening to me, I would say chinna. Same word, but different way of saying it and different way of expressing. So in our language, in the Ktunaxa language, there is no one way of saying china. You can use it in different tones, I guess you would call it. And some of the old people, I know we had a couple of our speakers, we had a session with them. And one of the old ladies and one of the speakers was talking about it in a story. And she used that term. And that lady was one of the older ladies back in the 60s. And her thing was, "Henna." That's how long she had that word. So, in Ktunaxa, it doesn't matter how quickly or how slowly you speak. So it's all expressive in the way how you say the sentence. So that is one of the things it's different than in English.
Can I ask a question about that? Just, I was wondering, do you mean when you speak in your own rhythm, you can pronounce words as long as you get the sounds correct? If they're, how am I saying this? Like the way you emphasize certain parts of the word is fine if it's unique to you?
Yeah.
Like you were.
And one other thing too, as you were talking, it reminded me, the second last syllable in a word, in any of our words, goes up in tone, like chena, hovukati, tinaskinin. So that is how, when you listen to one of our speakers, that's how they'll talk like that, and it gives it that rhythm. So that is not that. I guess it is important for you to remember that, but in order to try and keep the language as clean as possible. So you could talk in, let's say, in English, if you were talking your Ktunaxa speed, your own speed, you could say, "Oh, I saw Angie today at Walmart." You could say that slow, and And some of the old people that were very fluent speakers that really talked, I call it university language, university Ktunaxa. They would just go, oh, today I saw Angie at Walmart, and da, 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 da. And they just continue on going. And I played a tape for my language group, which I've been working with for about a year and a half now. And they thought I had the lady on fast feed. Well, that was her way of speaking. And you really had to pay attention because she talked really fast. And then there were other ones that would talk really slow. A lot of our conversation back in the day was one person talking and the other person, the odd time, would say, ah, ah. And that was so that the person that was talking, it was almost like a monologue. They would be telling a story and that other person would be passively listening, but reaffirming that they were listening by the odd ha, that kind of sound. And so it was almost like not really good to interrupt that person's train of thought if they're telling a story, especially with a legend. They'd be talking, and some of these ladies would be. I have one recording of one of these ladies talking the language. She's one of the old speakers talking really fast, like really, really fast. And when they would tell the stories, they'd get right into the story and they'd be talking and they'd be getting excited. And she was telling a legend of something, and she went and threw in the name of a person that was presently alive at that time into the legend. And she caught herself, like she'd be talking with legend, and then muskrat went and running, and beaver jumped into the lake, and muskrat went chasing them. And then beaver went and jumped or dove down and came way up after muskrat was going. And then when muskrat just about caught up to them, then beaver went back down, and then Mara went and did this. And then she had made the mistake of putting in let's say I put in Mara in there instead of muskrat. And then it was funny because she was so involved in telling a story that she made the mistake of, and for some reason that person's name was in her mind, so she stuck the woman into the legend. And so that broke her train of thought, and they laughed, and then she continued. So that was probably a way to slow her down on her story. So things like that happen. We have, with the language, I'm finding that we are doing very multiple things with our language. One is with this group, we've got beginners to get you guys to a certain level. We've got the other group, my group, I call them Spider's Web group. They're working at a different level. They're looking at the language in a totally different way than you guys will be. They're taking the words apart and learning all the different pieces. And then on top of that, we've got adults, Ktunaxa adults in that course who were raised with hearing the language, but they never taught it. So we're trying to invigorate that language knowledge that they have in the back of their mind for them to bring it forward, even though they're not too sure what they heard as kids. And then on top of that, we have I'm gonna call them the fluent speakers that are having difficulty keeping their language fluid. And so we're working at all different levels with the language. And so I'm sort of the one that stirs the pot, because I've been the one that's been working at the language for years and years. And once we get started, so we have our, I'm working at watching all the different levels of the language, and our speakers are wanting more speaking sessions so they get the language out a lot better, which is really hard because I call it Ktunaxa line. We have do I call it the Ktunaxa line, thinking in Ktunaxa. If any of you have taken French, how the French speak the language is totally different. And sometimes the English people say they talk backwards. And so that's how our talking, our Ktunaxa language is very similar to that. And so it's pretty hard to try and translate something from English to Ktunaxa. We in our elders group, we were doing that before, but we thought we're not doing the language justice. So we would translate it in Ktunaxa with a Ktunaxa brain, Ktunaxa way of thinking, and then we would translate that into English. So we had the English that was needed, we translated to Ktunaxa. We'd look at it from a Ktunaxa perspective and then go back the other way. So it's been quite interesting, because for the elders to do that is really good, because we're getting a more truer interpretation of what, the work needs to be done. So any other questions?
Hi, Alfred. I didn't want to ask this too early, but I'd missed it at the end of last week, and I was hoping you could spell out and repeat how to say goodbye.
Okay. One way is apostrophe A-N, on. And then the next word is W-U-N-I-K, I-T, on Winnipeg. I had to think of that because for me, I would rather people say Tachta, which means later, T-A-X-T-A. There's a couple of things why I say that. Because I'm such a linguist purist. On Winnipeg, when I would hear that, when the people, even the elders, when we started using that for, see you later, or like later on, they would look at the person saying that, and whenever we heard on Winnipeg, there was always something attached to that. Like later on, I will go to town, or later on, I'm going to go lay down, or later on, I'm going to go to, play ball. So on Winnipeg was never used on its own. So it's a new thing. So
heard-
Ktunaxa, yeah,
I've heard Taxta on Winnicott together. Is that something that's used?
you're the only one that I heard using it.
Okay, I'll stop.
No, it's okay, because it's more, the like Ktunaxa on Winnicott is more, I would say more correct, because you're saying later, and then that gives me, like, when you say that, that gives me later,
It's okay. You don't have to positively reinforce my mistake. I'll take that one.
Well,
We'll
no, it
take the
isn't.
slap on the
No.
head on that one.
no, when you said that the first time, I thought, man, that fits together. Because in my Ktunaxa mind, it does fit together. Ktunaxa on Winnicott, which means you're, later, was, like, yeah, later on kind of thing. But when you translate it that way, it doesn't make sense. But when you said Ktunaxa on Winnicott, it like fit together. So that was probably more acceptable than just on Winnicott, because you've already stated something like later, and then that's how it works in my mind, because I never heard that before, and you're the one that brought it out. So and then the other thing was, thank you. When you say thank you, um, some people, the majority of people say, "Oh, sukkahs cook me," like I am happy. As a Ktunaxa purist, language purist, I did not like that way of using that terminology, because the one I would rather people use was Sokni. It is good, we're done kind of thing. Sokni is what I would use for thank you. The reason why I would rather people use that is because Hosukokni, that term Hosukokni, that they're using, most people use that. In my Ktunaxa mind, Hosukokni is a very high level of I am happy, because if you were stuck out in the bush, your car broke down, or something happened, and you're not expecting anybody to show up, and you're there, you don't know what to do, and all of a sudden somebody happens to show up, that is what I call a Hosukokni moment. Okay, so that, to me, that's what what that term really means. Hosukokni is when you are down and you're needing help, and all of a sudden there's the help shows up out of the blue. So that is what I call a Hosukokni moment. So
And is there a word for gratitude or to express gratitude? Is it different than thank you?
no, it is good. Like
Yeah.
Yeah, the Ktunaxa were right to the point. We weren't mushy or anything. We just go right to the point.
So neat.
When we get mad, we go for the throat. So a lot of young people don't like that of us older people, and we have to watch ourselves.
sorry, what was that? It is good. Is it just sukuni?
Yeah, so can me.
Sukuni. Thanks.
And and you did something too that you just did, which I'm just going to point out, as you said, is it is good. Is it sukuni? You know how you went up at the end? Okay,
Yeah,
that's an English indication of asking a question.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you said, you know, is it good? So it's sukuni. And I would still understand you're asking a question.
Instead of
So
saying
that is,
sukuni,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So if you
Sukuni.
just tell it, yeah, then
So it
I would
almost,
understand you asking a question. So in English, we've learned, we've been taught to go up in our, at the end to indicate a question. And in our Ktunaxa, the indication for a question is the K. If adding a K at the start, let's say, Gint Aklish, are you going to ask him or her or them? Gint Aklish. So the K, that's a question. Hint Aklishni is a statement. So the ne on the end of that, that's a statement. So in our language, adding the K to Gint Aklish, a K to the what is to the noun and the K to the plural, the verb. That gives us a question. So, and it brings you to the fact or to the point of so kilkit. You know, the younger people, because they get stuck in mind that the K is a question. And we also have the other rule that says when you add a K to something, but let's say as in so kilkit means good day, it becomes a subject or an object, a thing. It's a good day. You're not asking, is it a good day? And it creates a lot of stupid arguments amongst our younger generation. They say, well, let's ask them a question. Okay, so kilkit, because they only heard that the K, when you have the K, that makes it into a question. But also when you add a K to a, let's say, our word for car is Ktunaxa, Kqan, and that basically means the thing that just goes. Because when the people saw a car, they could just see people would go in, get into it, and then all of a sudden would go. So they call it the thing that just goes. And they add the K, we add the K to that verb just goes. So when we add the K, it makes it the thing that just goes. But those are all just sort of little things that's what our, I'm gonna call it our future teachers are learning. They didn't know I was teaching them become teachers of the language. But those are the little things that they're learning, you know, as they're really looking into the language and we're taking it piece by piece. So then, you know, this group was just sort of, you know, if you hear, you know, someone, like if you say, "Que so kid," and they say, "Oh, is it?" You know, and that's why they would say that. because they're thinking you're asking them a question. But it's only our younger people that do that, so. And I always say, you always have to be prepared for stuff like that when people will try and trick you, like the coyote, he's a trickster. You know, you always have to be prepared to have a comeback like right away. You know, like, yeah, it is, you know, without even thinking. Because they, some people will say, well, we shouldn't be teaching language to non-Ktunaxa people. And I say, well, you guys haven't stepped up to the plate to learn it. But I'm always in an argumentative way all the time. Okay, any other questions? So Mary, you wanted to let the group know what we'll be doing next week?
So next week, we're going to start our words and using all of our slides, and we're going to be going through different themes every week. So be prepared, have lots of water, and honestly practice your and your as much as you can. And the wetter, the better.
Thanks, Vera. So, and everybody will be getting the map and the slides for next week, right?
Hey.
Because one thing I want you guys to write down on a piece of paper, ZUCCI HINNI. Okay, what's that word?
A zucchini.
Yeah, you guys have been saying that wrong all these years because it really says zucchini. Okay, very good. Case of dismissed. Good night, everybody, and see you next week. Yeah, Dr.
Jenny. Jenny.
Ktunaxa.